I understand how difficult the tension between feeling your soul calling you in one direction, but the system and what you've learned pulling you in another. This is the paradox that many of us feel. Energy work at its core is about embodiment, not handbooks, integrity, not imitation, truth, not tradition. Because you've already seen how mainstream Reiki operates, where hierarchy breeds limitation, power dynamics masquerade as wisdom, and individuality is quietly erased in the name of doing it right. Here we strip away illusion and return to the pulse of truth that doesn't outsource spiritual authority. It's not about replacing one dogma with another, it's about returning to the source of power. And that has always been within you, not in symbols, attunements, or lineages that ask you to surrender your sovereignty. This is not where you come to be taught how to do Reiki someone else's way. This is where you come to reclaim your own. For me, glory driven thinking says there's a destination to achieve, whereas soul led wisdom tells me there's only natural evolution to be present within. Evolution can't be a destination. For me, it's a state of being that breathes through all the moments I choose to listen deeper, live truer, and soften into what wants to emerge. It's not something to arrive at or complete. It's the sacred unfolding of myself again and again, layer by layer, season by season. It's a becoming. It's an unbecoming and becoming again without apology, without finality, without needing to be finished or indeed needing to be anything before I begin. And now, as a recovered control freak, there was a complete flip the script moment for me when I stopped gripping so tightly to outcomes and started honouring the becoming as the point. Because I'm not a project to solve, and I'm definitely not perfect, but I am human. And I want to feel, to me, and to move with myself. And I've noticed this theme coming up again in conversations recently that I've been having. I love having conversations. Expansive conversations excite me. You know, the type where the person doesn't always know they're sparking of something in me, whether it be someone who's welcomed me into their world to work with or someone who's serving me my shopping in the supermarket down the road. But when they ask me a question or state their view just in being who they are, a little light flickers in me, a shift in perspective, oh, that made me really think about this other thing, you know? There's this theme that I've noticed where there's a belief that we need to be someone or be somewhere specific before we begin on a sovereign Reiki path, before we trust our insights, before we share our truth, before we claim space as a transformational guide or practitioner, before we live authentically, lead authentically. That's a narrative for me that needs a little bit of unraveling. And I really, truly get it. The undertones in our culture are very much propped up on lack, aren't they? Think about what might seem really small, like sales that pressure urgency, wellness trends that feed insecurity, or compliments that only highlight that standard higher level productivity. It's really everywhere, always outsourcing. Yeah. Our worth, our joy, even our intuition, constantly handed over to experts, influencers, or systems that claim to know better. It can be subtle, but I've noticed it really does shape everything. Then we turn to mainstream Reiki, where in my experience, more of the same hierarchies dressed up as lineage, like needing an attunement to access Reiki energy, when actually it's all about reconnecting to spiritual wisdom, and we don't need an attunement. We don't need to be given permission to access Reiki energy, or indeed to do that uniquely and unrestrictedly. Gurus mistaken for guides, like teachers who preach their way is the way. There are certain order. There's a certain order to do things in, or a certain way to do things. Symbols, hand positions, do this, then do that, or just head to the handbook for the answers. Power dynamics hidden beneath flowery language, like being told your personal energy isn't high vibe enough, or just simply sensing the tone that to question someone in a perceived position of authority as a Reiki master is just a no-go. I was always trying to furiously help myself, to be more me. I'd meditate, I'd go to holistic classes, I'd stretch, go to the gym, eat different things. I'd use the mainstream Reiki principles that I'd been taught just for today. I will not worry, etc., etc. That's for a whole other podcast, the Reiki principles. But at the root of it all, what I was really trying to get to uncover, to feel, was my authentic core. And I didn't just want to live authentically, to feel passionate and peaceful, purposeful, fulfilled. I knew I wanted to be an authentic leader, walking my talk, supporting others from a place of lived experience, using where I'd been in my life from a healed perspective to help other people. And I see similar time and time again with those that welcome me into their world. They don't just want to tell people how or show them the way or be placed on a pedestal. They know innately they've got gifts to offer this world. They sense so deep that the more they want in and from life is possible, and they aren't here to follow a script. They're here to write their own, to walk a path that doesn't need to be paved by someone else's footsteps. They're not trying to be the loudest in the room or the most polished in presentation. There's a sovereign steadiness in them that says, I know there's more, and I am so ready to meet that my way. I sense it, I feel it, I see it because I am it. But what I found really challenging personally was in the realisation that I'd actually always been ready. I just didn't believe it, and I didn't trust myself enough to believe it. I spent years thinking I had to earn it, to heal more, to prove myself more, to know more, to fix more, to be more, before I could claim my place, before I could trust my gifts, before I could show up fully. Like somehow my imperfections disqualify me, like the messy human honest parts of me made me unworthy of the path I was already walking. But the truth is, my readiness wasn't waiting on perfection, it was waiting on permission. And that permission had to come from me. It was never in the doing, it was always in the being. And I had to leave behind every old metric I'd ever used to define success, because none of that applied on a journey of rediscovering myself. The boxes I used to tick, the roles I used to play, the praise I used to chase, they belonged to a version of me that was shaped by expectation, certainly not my own truth. And as I shed those layers, I realised success for me is alignment. It's integrity. It's being able to hear my soul and actually listen, then actually take inspired action. At certain points in my path, I wasn't able to listen to that soul calling. And then when I did start to listen, I didn't take the inspired action through either fear or resistance, or just quite simply not having the tangible skills to allow me to do that. It's doing work that feels purposeful, and no spreadsheet or title or external applause could ever compare to that for me. And I didn't have to change, not a jot, to be a different type of person. I am and always have been this person. I just needed those skills to keep meeting new layers of myself, uncovering new aspects of myself as I go, grounded, rooting that into reality. I think we often don't talk enough about our mentors. Why is that? Considered that just before I started chatting to you today. Here's what I've noticed. The one amazing mentor I've had cultivated the conditions for me to unearth my own answers, for me to hold my own power, for me to do my own work. Would it have been possible without that environment, support, guidance, wisdom? Absolutely not. We're used to culturally being shown the way, told how. I personally was always used to people allowing me also to place them on a pedestal, ego-driven behaviour, and to experience this type of shift from mainstream to mentor in this way as well is, in my experience, the power. It means the reclaiming of spiritual authority. It's not outsourced to any external person or place, because all the answers are within. And I've heard that said, it's so cliche, I've heard it said so many times within the spiritual and holistic sphere, like it's fluff. But we don't need to be taught the answers. For me, that's really disempowering. Not just as someone who seeks out a mentor, but someone who is also a mentor. Let me tell you a story. I arrived at my Reiki Master's training, Usuvi Reiki. I initially trained in, I don't subscribe to levels or lineage now as a sovereign Reiki reclamation mentor. I arrived to this training and went into a class with my now partner. They weren't my partner at that time. And I was beside myself. I'd been studying furiously. I knew I'd be tested, in inverted commas, in some symbols. I can't even remember those symbols now. They don't work for me, so I don't use them. I've got graduates from my spirit-led Reiki pathway who still use some symbols and love them, and that's the beauty right there, right? Finding one's own unique way, following spiritual guidance and intuition. So I was almost ill about this. I was sweating because I'd gone into this master's training and had very little, if any, really at all, skills to support my own growth, my own personal energy. Me as an intuitive, empathic human being. Spoke to you last episode about being an intuitive empath. And so I was really trapped inside those gifts. I was also a horrendous people pleaser and a perfectionist. And growing up, I was the smart one. I was the golden child. That was the role I played. Essentially, I grew up with constant praise and pressure to be perfect, particularly academically. That remained with me. And furthermore to that, I actually walked into an environment in this training where it was magnified. A space where mental body intellect was prized over intuition and spiritual wisdom, where hierarchy was disguised as false modesty, and where performance, like this performance of doing it right, i.e. the way I'd been taught, outweighed finding my own way. Looking back, this all makes so much sense. There was no support and pathway to truly trust myself and thereby hone and honour my intuition, or a shift from being trapped to empowered as an intuitive empath, or guidance on reconnecting with my spiritual self or team, all within what is a spiritual modality. So of course, the theory, the cognitive, the intellect, it had to be prized over intuition and spiritual wisdom. Mainstream Reiki, I've come to learn, really isn't set up to hold, to honour, and to value the depth on a soul-led path. You might be thinking, what were you doing going back there, Jane? You'd already done Reiki 1 and Reiki 2, so why go back? Now, I questioned nothing, particularly those who were in a perceived position of authority, like I mentioned before. I didn't have the physical skills to actually form what I wanted to say without melting down internally, because I couldn't deal with any type of, I would have felt this as conflict to question. I spoke about this last episode as well. So I went back to train with the same person that I did Reiki 1 and Reiki 2 with, Usui Reiki 1, Usui Reiki 2. And I can giggle about that now, but it would have been a deal in the circles that I used to fly in to change Reiki Master. Essentially, it would have been a deal to have autonomy, agency, and spiritual authority, because that's what happens inside a system of hierarchy, right? Autonomy, agency, and spiritual authority aren't encouraged. So naturally, I adapted. I performed. I tried to earn my place again, but this time I wasn't in a classroom. I was searching for soul deep transformation for myself and to support other people on their path as well. What I truly craved wasn't more gold stars or polished titles. It was realness, raw, reverent connection to my own truth in a space where individuality, unique gifts were truly valued. Essentially where I was valued as an exclusive human being. Anyway, back to the story. So I'm in this room and I was so nervous when it came to being tested on these symbols. I forgot them. I nearly, honestly, I felt in that moment like I was dying. I could hardly breathe. And I looked over at my now partner, who had read not a jot, studied not a jot. And there they were, scribbling away, You can only imagine in that moment what I was thinking to myself, right? Now, let me give you some more context here. Now, a decade on. There are three paths a young person can take in response to the contrast between the world they experience growing up and the world they instinctively and intuitively know should be. There's resignation. That puts trust in the mind and not the intuition. And this typically is the most popular path of the three. You become resigned to what is and adapt to fit in. As a human, you need things to be congruent. Yeah. So you stop listening to the voice that guides you. You develop beliefs, values, relationships, careers, hobbies, lifestyles to fit in. The problem, intuition's never gone. It's only ever silenced. So you never feel authentic or whole, living on the edge of what can feel like stress quite constantly, knowing deeply, whether consciously or not, that your life choices are in contradiction to what you instinctively know to be true. And that was very much me putting trust in the mind and not in the intuition. Then we've got confliction, where we put trust in the intuition, but not the mind. So here you see yourself as a misfit because your intuition doesn't match what you've been told in reality. You know you're really intuitive, but real life is telling you otherwise. You can feel struck into mental instability because rather than choosing to live in your head and ignore your instincts, you distrust your mind. You might develop panic or anxiety disorders. Society confirms your belief that you're broken because your instincts about how the world should be versus how it is, they don't match. And this was my now partner. Now, these two aren't mutually exclusive. You can float back and forth between the two. But very much at this point in my life that I'm talking about in this training story, that's where I sat and that's where my partner sat. So from this alone, not accounting for any other life experience, what we're seeing here is two very different people coming at the table, and how, taking this into account, it manifested in this training situation in many respects. I'd been frantically studying to please to be perfect, all about the mental body intellect, complete distrust of the intuition, despite already having done Usui Reiki 1 and Usui Reiki 2. Now, my partner, complete trust of intuition, but distrust of the mind, which of course impacted in other ways. And now, after asking my partner, I said, what were you turning up there for? Because it was going to obviously be really different to the wife and me. And they said, in the hope of alchemy, to pick up something that tied it all together because it was also stilted and weird. So then I asked, how did that work out for you? And they said, terribly. I opened a can of worms with energy that I didn't have proper training in. So they said it moved them further away from trusting their intuition and into questioning themselves, which for them wasn't much of a feature before. And they said, I've never been able to fill in the gaps of theory and all the rest until I did your trial round of Lifting the Veil on Reiki. I've linked Lifting the Veil on Reiki for you in the podcast notes. It's a free hour-long workshop where you are invited, should you feel the call, to reclaim your sovereign energy practice beyond mainstream limitations. I trial all of my offerings out, whether free or paid for, over months, sometimes years actually, before I release them. My partner's always in the trial round. So from both sides of the coin, me being someone who trusted the mind and not my intuition, from the flip where my partner trusted their intuition but not the mind, we both landed in roughly the same place with mainstream Reiki. But of course, as individual humans with exclusive holes left from that training in our various different ways. And I notice similar experiences often, not always. Some people love their initial mainstream Reiki training and want to honour natural evolution within a sovereign path, owning their spiritual authority. But I notice similar types of experiences with those that come into my world. I'm sure actually on my website there's a video of Sam, a spirit-led Reiki graduate, speaking about her experience on there. The third path, because I mentioned there was three paths, right? That a person can take is recognition. That puts trust in both the mind and the intuition. tend to find, in my experience, that this happens in our culture a little bit later on in life to much, much later on in life. Here we recognise the world perceived through our minds doesn't match the perception of how it should be, and according to your instincts, intuition, you're viewing this as separate from you. You've moved into a state of positive change to be able to help yourself and the world become closer to what you intuitively believe should be, by focusing in on your own life and your own contribution, knowing that the misalignment has got nothing to do with you. You're choosing to live your best possible life on the battlefield, and you're able to remain positive that the world will change. You've got balance between mental and intuitive self. I sometimes feel that simplifies and distills down what can often be really quite complex in terms of giving freely, or giving from, hanging oneself at the altar of giving from obligation. But if you want to explore that more, jump back into last week's podcast. But this path of recognition is really what I was aiming for. But it took me a sovereign path with energy work to find that, because I was never meant to play a role. I was always meant to return to my whole. I find folks, like I said before, aren't looking for another teacher on a pedestal, or to be crammed into a space to be tested or told how. They're seeking a space where their inner truth is recognised and not refined, where authentic leadership means embodiment, not instruction. And that's the kind of resonance that we all share. Now, I mentioned embody there. Embodying is really where it all comes alive. And it's the third key element in my root, build, embody process to reclaim sovereign energy practice. Here, we're not just learning or teaching, we are living our work, honouring what we sense in that respect. So embodiment means our practice is integrated into our actions, our words, our choices. It's felt, it's magnetic, it's real. We lead with authenticity, not by shouting louder, but by walking in truth. The element of embody within the root, build, embody process is about being a lighthouse, not for attention, but because you simply are the presence that you once sought for yourself. And now you can hold that space for others to do similar. Sovereign, liberated, and in service in the work that you were exclusively born to do in your own individual, unique way. I speak to gatekeeping, and hierarchy a lot, and to the really vast illusion that there's a right way, a better lineage, or a correct persona in order to do Reiki. But the truth is, embodiment isn't handed to you as claimed, not through credentials, but through congruence, through being the work, not just doing the work. And this is where I find mainstream Reiki shoots you in the foot a little bit, so to speak, because let's just take 5 minutes to consider what we're fed. That we aren't enough in our authenticity at whatever stage we begin our Reiki journey, that we need a master to allow us access to Reiki, to confirm our readiness, to grant us permission to walk a path that already we are walking with our name on it. We're conditioned to believe that without the title, without someone above us saying we're good enough, we must not be. But that's the great forgetting, because sovereign energy work doesn't ask you to be chosen, it asks you to choose yourself. Truth doesn't flow because someone gave you the nod. It flows when you say yes to embodying. It's a way of life, sovereign energy work, no matter what life you are living. And it doesn't start and stop when you check in and check out of a session with a client. Therefore, you cannot be ready simply as you are, right in this moment. You don't need to earn your place in this work. You are the place. You are the work. You are the authority. And anything that makes you forget that isn't truth. It's a tactic. Because in my experience, this path, it meets you where you are, not where you've been told you should arrive, not once you've fixed all your stuff, not once you've uncovered your authenticity. You are authentic, just in existing, in evolution, because we are always constantly evolving. There is no destination or endpoint. Authenticity for me is not a fixed identity. It's a living, breathing relationship with truth as it is now. It's a willingness to meet myself honestly, moment by moment, to shift, to learn, to shift again when I grow, to speak when it matters, to honour stillness. It's the courage to be in all my shades, not just the polished ones. Those polished ones, you know them? The ones that are acceptable or comfortable. A lifelong dance with trust in my inner knowing, raw and real and ever evolving. And that's why embodiment is so pivotal, because it negates the gurus. There are no pedestals. There's no reaching outwards for truth that already lives within. No silencing your own voice to echo someone else's. Embodiment calls it back home. I don't know about you, but I'm not here to show anyone. I'm not here to tell anyone the way. I'm not here to preach. I'm not here to pretend I've got all the answers. I'm not here to hand out rules like it's spiritual candy. I'm here to walk my sovereign path, to honour that whisper that moves me, to invite others to do the same. Not follow, but remember. And in being who I am and honouring my gifts, in the way that I cultivate an environment for those who feel the call to unearth and own their unique gifts. Because the way, it's not out there. It's always been humming inside of each of us the whole time. Energy work at its core is about embodiment, not handbooks, integrity, not imitation, truth, not tradition. When you sensed that something was missing from your mainstream Reiki training, you were right. The power has always been within you, not in symbols, attunements, or lineages that ask you to surrender your sovereignty. Energy flows through embodied truth, through the fullness of who you are when all masks fall away. Sovereign energy practice, reclamation, isn't about replacing one dogma with another. It's about returning to the source of power. And when you step away from prescribed methods and into connecting in alignment with your spiritual authority, the gaps in your training become irrelevant. Your intuition and spiritual wisdom becomes grounded in reality. Your healing impact amplifies naturally. And in my experience, those who resist this truth will continue to defend their limitations. Those who recognise it will find liberation. We're all on a path of evolution every single day, and for me, that's about deepening, not congruence, not performing healing, being it, not preaching alignment, living it. Evolution for me is about meeting my edges with compassion, honouring the voice within over the noise outside, and creating space for others to do the same. And it's courageous. It's courageous to say, I evolve. I'm not the final product. I won't ever be. It's vulnerable. In a world that encourages everyone to have the answers, to present as if they are the finished product, to be successful, and in very commas. This isn't about being better than anybody else. It's about being braver with ourselves. Because when you choose to walk in your authentic spiritual authority without waiting for permission, the work becomes alive. Not just for you, but for those that you're here to serve, that are actually waiting on your unique light in a way that no one else can help support them. Your purpose here in the world on a healing path is different from mine. It's different from the next person. That's what reclaiming a sovereign energy practice is. It's rooting down into your exclusive gifts, your exclusive style of energy work, your exclusive essence, and letting that lead the way. We're not static. How can we expect to learn A plus B equals C methods using the mental body of intellect? Like hand positions go here, symbol does this, do things in the XYZ order to achieve a certain outcome. How can we expect to adhere to that type of dogma on a soul path? Far less than try and blend everything, all of our beautiful skills and gifts and all of these just amazing parts of who we are as a human being. How do we then blend them together? You know, if you're somebody who's got a bank of holistic modalities and wants to bring those out into fruition and into the world, how are we doing that with the A plus B equals C rigid, dogmatic, restrictive methods? As I'm sure I've said before, we're intuitives, craving depth, liberation and freedom. We simply can't thrive inside systems that are restrictive or confining. Most of us have done that our whole lives, tried to fit in to make it work for us. And honestly, has it? Has it worked for you this far? It's definitely not for me. Because trying to fit in, my experience, it costs too much when you're trying to break through. As intuitives, we're wired for depth, not surface level rules. We're here for expansion and not limitation. We crave the kind of freedom that lets us breathe as who we truly are, right now, in this moment. And those systems we tried so hard to make work, they were never designed with souls like ours in mind. We don't need tighter boxes, we need wider skies. Have you ever considered that your exclusive experience with Reiki this far holds more wisdom than any manual ever could? That your unanswered questions are not just valid, but are affirming your intuitive hunch that the version of Reiki you were taught does have gaps? That your source of power, potential, and uncapped possibility doesn't come from lineage or levels, it most definitely does come from within. And if you're not yet Reiki trained, you're tuned in energetically, or you wouldn't be here and with me right now. You might be in the position where you would rather avoid being boxed in before you even begin. Sovereign energy reclamation isn't about starting over, it's about claiming what has always been yours. And on that note, if you feel called to reclaim your sovereign energy practice beyond mainstream limitations, I mentioned before I've got an hour-long free workshop for you inside Embodied Echoes after the pod, hosted inside our free online non-guru community that I've crafted with this in mind. If you feel the call, I really invite you to dive in. The links to the community and there's a standalone link to the workshop too that are in the podcast notes for you. Whether I connect more with you in the community or not, I really look forward to chatting more right here next episode. Dogma and spiritual hierarchy isn't the one, but you already know that, because sitting inside mainstream Reiki communities is often like choking inside a gilded cage, truth traded for toxic conformity, experience wielded like a weapon to silence others, individuality stifled for compliance. So I invite you to my free online non-guru community with no hierarchy or all-knowing behaviour. Here we don't follow, we liberate. We don't obey, we expand. We don't go with the crowd, we cultivate our own path together. Which means this isn't a place where your voice is silenced if it sounds different, or where your questions are met with judgment, because genuine heart-led connection and collaboration is rooted in truth, in trust, and integrity, where authenticity thrives, respect is embodied, and every unique voice is honoured as equal. The link's in the podcast notes for you.